last topic. Save the best for last. And I got a lot of questions that we've harvested that may end up being duplicative. I'm going to try not to plow the same ground twice here, but last night, what a sense of timing for Judge Philip Gutierrez. Within 45 minutes before kickoff of the Hall of Fame game to start the 105th season of the National Football League, with the swoop of a pen, Judge Gutierrez threw out the entirety of the Sunday Ticket class action antitrust verdict of $4.7 billion, which, if it had become a judgment, would have automatically tripled to $14.1 billion. Incredible development. Unexpected, one day after the hearing. And, look, I'll admit, I was skeptical of the reporting from the hearing about the judge saying the jury didn't follow his instructions, because I said, look, if that's accurate, rule from the bench. Well, he ruled one day later, and he had a 16-page written opinion ready to go, which means he knew what he was going to do going into that hearing. He knew damn well. And maybe he's got a little sense of the dramatic. I'm going to drop this thing right before the start of the Hall of Fame game. I could say a lot about it, and I will say a lot about it. I'm just going to pick my spots here, and I'm going to try to be economical because there's a lot of different ways to look at this. First of all, it's a huge win for the NFL. And there was a lot of concern spreading throughout the league about what this would mean if every team had to come up with $440 million. These owners aren't just going to take it out of their pockets. It's going to come out of other pockets. There was a concern already that they were going to try to foist some of this onto the players through the salary cap. But even if they didn't, the willingness of teams to spend cash would have diminished in the year they had to spend the $440 million. For example, Jordan Love getting $79 million in cash this year. That wouldn't happen in the year that the Packers would have had to come up with $440 million. So there would have been an impact. Teams would have been spending less overall. There's a cap and there's a floor. Some teams congregate at the cap. We would have seen a lot of teams congregate at the floor until they get their $440 million back. They're never going to pay it out of their own pockets. And this isn't an indictment of the NFL's owners. This is just an observation about business. You get hit hard, you look for ways to spread it around within your current broader structure. Less money for the players, less money for the coaches. Maybe we're going to lay some people off. We're going to spend less on facilities. It would have had a trickle-down effect. They talk about trickle-down economics where if you reduce the taxes, then that has a trickle-down effect to everybody else. It's more money for everybody else. Well, I don't know how true that is, but I'll take it if it means lower taxes. But the opposite is definitely true. If you dump a big pile of shit on the owners financially, pardon me, Gary, sorry, you got to take that out, but they're going to pass it downhill. The shit flows downhill. The reduced taxes might not, but the expenses will. So it's good for the NFL and everyone connected to it directly that this goes away. It's bad for the consumers, though, because the people who've been overcharged for Sunday Ticket since its inception in 1994 are going to get nothing. And I say that because, and let's understand exactly what the judge did. The judge didn't find that the jury incorrectly ruled it was an antitrust violation. He specifically said there was more than enough evidence to support the finding that the NFL violated the antitrust laws, given the way it constructed and distributed and priced the Sunday Ticket package, period. So this is the thing that the NFL will never put in a statement. A jury has found that Sunday Ticket, as currently engineered and operated, violates federal antitrust laws. Period. The problem was that the judge ultimately decided that the expert witnesses presented by the plaintiffs to prove the damages weren't sufficiently reliable. Now, the judge is the gatekeeper for determining what expert testimony is and isn't allowed. And the thing that kind of has me twisted in knots is he allowed these folks to testify. And you know in advance what they're going to say. This is part of the discovery process, the expert witness disclosure process. You know what's going to be said. And the other side gets a chance to take a lengthy deposition of the expert. They see his report. They're able to pick it apart. And then they file a motion ahead of time to exclude that witness as an expert. And that's where the judge operates as the gatekeeper to say, I'm sorry, but this person's opinions aren't sufficiently reliable. I'm exercising my prerogative as the gatekeeper for the expert witness function to say he or she can't testify. In this case, the judge let them testify. They said exactly what they were expected to say. And then after the fact, the judge says, they're not reliable. I changed my mind. What the hell is that? What is that? It's almost like the judge, and let's take a step back. The case originally was thrown out by the judge originally assigned to the case. She has since deceased. It's been 9 years. She threw the case out. The appeals court resurrected the case and sent it back. Judge Gutierrez, who was appointed to the court by George W. Bush, and we've talked about this before, judges who are picked by Republican presidents have a pro-business bias. Judges who are picked by Democratic presidents have a pro-consumer bias. That's just the way it is. So it falls back to Gutierrez. Gutierrez has concerns about the case, but I think he made the calculation, maybe the jury will save me here. Maybe I don't have to throw the case out. Maybe the jury comes back with a goose egg or a finding for the NFL, and I don't have to get my hands dirty. I don't have to be in a position where the appeals court may smack me down, just like the appeals court smacked down the prior ruling that the entire case was thrown out. I think that's the game he was playing. The problem is, it's a little easier to do it before there's 14.1 billion riding on it, because now you're going to have some people who are like, hey, what the hell? Why are you taking away? Why are you wasting? I mean, it was a waste of everyone's time and money. Like, if you knew there were issues with the expert witnesses, why in the hell didn't you just throw the case out then, instead of making everyone go through the motions of a 4-week trial, have the jurors tied up for all those days, all those expenses for the legal fees and the $1,000 plus per hour that some of the expert witnesses were charging to sit there and watch the case as it unfolds? Why are you wasting all that time and money when you know what you're going to do anyway? And judges will do that. Hey, let's see what the jury does. Maybe the jury gives me cover. That's what he was looking for. Maybe the jury's going to give me cover here. Oh, they didn't. Well, I got to do what I was going to do anyway. I was always inclined to throw out the case, and the jury's now forcing me to throw out the case. I think that's it in a nutshell. And again, I'll have more to say about it, but I've read most of the transcript. I got to the closing arguments, and I figured, well, at this point, I should probably redirect my efforts, given that the product, ultimately, of the effective closing argument by the plaintiffs was overturned by the judge. And there's no new trial. The judge basically said, your expert witnesses are crap, and you have nothing else. So even though the jury reasonably found that there was an antitrust violation, there's no damages. There's not even $1. There's nothing. There's no injury proven to the class. So even though the USFL was able to get $1, which unlocked the ability to get attorney's fees on the back end, where you put in a bill for all the time you spent on the case, this is zero. This is nothing. The plaintiff's lawyers get nothing. They're out of pocket whatever they spent on getting the case ready, depositions, travel, expert witnesses. That money's gone and it's never coming back. This is one of the reasons why I defend contingent fees, because in a case like this, it never gets going if the named plaintiffs are the ones who have to pay that. The lawyers front all of that, and they get it all back later, and they justify the risk of losing that money by the reward that comes from the contingency fee. So if this stands, they're screwed. Now, obviously, they're going to appeal it. And we'll see what happens. There's a question about that, so I'll defer to that specific question. The one point that I think we need to remember, Sunday Ticket, as it's currently constructed, violates the antitrust laws. The jury's found it, and the judge, who was inclined to do the NFL a hell of a favor here, a $14.1 billion favor, that judge was not willing to say that the jury's verdict was incorrect. And the judge at one point during the trial said, going into this case, I was thinking maybe the plaintiffs have the better of it. It's pretty simple. I'm a Seahawks fan in LA. I can't watch the Seahawks. I got to pay a lot of money to watch the Seahawks. There's something wrong with that. So what happens with that? That's my big question. The judge has found that the jury reasonably concluded that Sunday Ticket violates the antitrust laws. So what do you do? Why not issue an order that you can no longer band together, assign the exclusive rights to Sunday Ticket to one company, and then either directly or indirectly compel that company to charge so much that most of the fans will say, I'll just watch the games that are made available for free in my local market on CBS and Fox. The thing that the judge relied upon the most in throwing out the testimony, and this was Daniel Rasher, Dr. Daniel Rasher, this was his but-for world, because this is how it works. You prove that the defendants violated the antitrust laws in the real world. So how do you determine the financial loss? Well, we have to construct a world that would have existed but for the antitrust violation. And what Rasher tried to do is say, if you take away Sunday Ticket, the end result will be that all of the out-of-market games will be televised at no extra charge on a variety of networks that will pay for the rights to show this game, that game, that game, that game. So you would have basically, I think this is how it would look. CBS and Fox would have the rights to broadcast the home market games. Steelers in Pittsburgh, Jets, Giants in New York, Cowboys in Texas. And then the feeds, just like they currently go to YouTube, those feeds would end up on other networks for out of market. So if I'm in Pittsburgh, Steelers game is going to be on CBS or Fox, and then all the other games are going to be on other networks, and they're all going to be on at the same time. That was basically the model that Rasher put forward, like college football. All those games are on at any given time. And I don't think that that's conceptually all that hard to understand. See, the judge was either unwilling or unable to understand that that's a plausible alternate universe. And in that universe, the plaintiffs pay nothing as opposed to the money that they were paying for Sunday Ticket. So $7 billion was the number. If there had been no extra charge for Sunday Ticket, $7 billion is what the class would have avoided. Now, the judge didn't even get to the question of whether or not the $4.7 billion verdict was impermissible. He eventually said, even if I didn't throw out the case because the expert witnesses are unreliable, the jury still came up with its own number. But that's a fallback that doesn't matter at that point. The threshold argument is, I threw this thing out because the expert witnesses are unreliable, because he refused to understand or accept Dr. Rasher's but-for analysis, even though he knew before the case that's what it was going to be. That's what should irritate a lot of people here. You knew ahead of time. You could have avoided all of this if you just would have had the courage to say, I'm throwing the case out. But no, maybe the jury will give me cover. Oh, the jury didn't. Well, now I'll throw the case out instead. That's the end result. Regardless of all that, let's find out what the world would look like without the antitrust violation. Let's make the NFL get rid of Sunday Ticket. If a jury finds it's an antitrust violation, let's get rid of Sunday Ticket, and let's see what the NFL, working in concert with the various networks, will do. And I want to give you another example of why, and I've said this before. A judge will pick an ending point and work backward to justify it with the facts and the law. And this judge wanted to find against the plaintiffs, clearly. And you can see traces of the way that facts and law get twisted to fit the path working backward through the maze. For example, there's a footnote where he talks about how former CBS Sports chairman Sean McMahon has said that CBS wouldn't be interested in its current package in a world where all these other games were broadcast by other networks and they were going to have to share their feeds with other networks. Well, that's just purely speculative. That's self-serving. If you change reality, and CBS is faced with a choice between no football at all or a situation where CBS is sending crews to 6 or 7 different cities every week, and in the various markets, they're feeding that game, and the feeds go to all these other networks, like it currently goes to DirecTV and now YouTube for Sunday Ticket. If that's their choice, it doesn't matter what Sean McMahon says now. Oh, we wouldn't be interested. Well, first of all, you don't work there anymore. And second of all, how do you know you wouldn't be interested? So I think the easiest solution to all this, and apologies in advance to our friends at 345 Park Avenue, but the jury found that Sunday Ticket violates the antitrust laws. And I have a hard time accepting a world in which a jury has found, with the endorsement of the judge, that there was sufficient evidence to reach that finding, that an antitrust violation was committed. But it's impossible to attach damages to it because we can't envision the world without the antitrust violation. So the NFL just gets to keep committing the antitrust violation? That doesn't make any sense. So, look, there are millions of fans out there. This is from the NFL's own internal documents. Millions of fans who are underserved when it comes to their desire to have out-of-market games. 2 to 3 million have Sunday Ticket. The number of fans that would watch out-of-market games is anywhere from 35 million to 70 million. If every game that was being played on a Sunday afternoon was available somewhere on your basic cable, satellite, or streaming package, I think millions more would watch. I think at the end of the day, the NFL would make more money. They're just not willing to do it. Because once you let that genie out of the bottle, that genie's not going back in. That toothpaste not going. Whatever cliche we want to use, it's not going to be undone. And I think that's why they've resisted doing it. They've looked into doing it. They've had their new frontier analysis where they considered it. I don't think they want to do it. They don't want to risk the bird in the hand for the two in the bush because there's, in theory, a chance the bird in the hand flies away. Still, there's an antitrust violation that has been hiding in plain sight for 30 years, and there's no remedy for it. And for now, the NFL's gotten away with it. We'll see what happens on appeal. I saw an article today, and a lot of the media out there I'm sorry, very pro-NFL on this, suggesting that this outcome from yesterday will discourage others from following suit. I think that the fact that there was an antitrust violation found encourages others to take another swing at this. 2023, that's not part of the class action. 2024, that's not part of the class action. If the NFL doesn't change, there will be separate liability that continues to arise. And what needs to happen is somebody needs to find an expert witness that can come up with a but-for world that the judge will accept, both before trial and after the verdict comes in. And it's luck of the draw. I hate to make it that simple, but I would argue to you that if the judge presiding over the case had been appointed by Clinton or Obama or Biden, we'd have a different outcome. The $4.7 billion would have stood. President appointed by, or judge appointed by a Republican president, out it goes. It's just, listen, I did it for 19 years. That was always the number one concern in any case. If you were representing the defendant and your client was sued, who's the judge? If you were the plaintiff and you file the case, especially when it goes into one of these systems where it's luck of the draw, roll of the dice, rotation, who's the judge? What judge did we get? Oh, good. Oh, shit. One or the other. That's the way it worked. And it was driven by the political background, the manner in which the judge got on the court, what kind of law the judge practiced before the judge became a judge. That shapes your view of the world. And there's so many different ways to skin this cat. And I think there's more than enough evidence that a judge that wanted to find for the plaintiffs could have upheld that verdict. And there's also apparently more than enough evidence that a judge that wanted to throw it out could do it. But either way, this will get appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit and then ultimately the Supreme Court. There's too much money at issue for that to not happen.